This conference will now be recorded.
Roll call. Angie DeSanto?
Here. Here.
John Kopeck?
Here.
Paul Varga?
Here.
Jesse Burnham?
Here.
Garth Bean? And
Here.
Judith Austin? Christina Davis?
Here.
Hugh, we know, is not going to be here, and Esther's not here. Garth, do you want me to do that now, or?
Sure.
Okay, so we have 5 regular members, and we're going to seat Christina Davis for Garth Bean. Okay, communications, I
Judy?
don't have anything.
Judy,
Yes.
just a point of order. Your ex officio member is here.
Hi, Bill.
Hi.
I don't have any communications.
Hey, Judy, do we have to vote on seating Christina for Garth? Was that?
No, because Garth is right there and he requested it. I mean,
Fine by me.
yeah, technically it probably should have been in writing, but since he's right there, it's, you know.
It's on video.
Yeah, it's obvious to me.
I don't trust what he says. I only trust what he writes.
Yep. Read but verify.
You should trust neither.
Okay, so communications, I don't have any at the moment. So public comments, I guess if there's no communications, there's no comments, right? Approval minutes of the regular meeting for Thursday, January 27th, 2022. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion. Paul Varga.
Do I have a second?
Angie DeSanto, second.
Let's see. Are there any corrections?
I have a correction.
Go ahead, Chris. It's the same one. So if you want to,
Okay.
Either way.
So on the second page, the motion under item D, this is about the funds for the truck. On the 1, 2, 3, 4th line down, it says, or if not deemed an inappropriate expense. So that's a double negative. And I think to correct it, it needs to be, or if not deemed an appropriate. So remove IN at the beginning of the word. So it's appropriate.
It was just the confusion of words in the motion because we kept going. There was so many things within that motion that was wrong or inappropriate or appropriate. So just drop inappropriate and change it to appropriate, and that solves the confusion.
Agreed.
Any other comments? Okay. All those in favor of approving the minutes for Thursday, January 27th, 2022,
Aye.
please signify by saying aye.
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 Christina, aye.
So we got a Christina, Jesse,
Angie.
Angie, myself, Paul, so 5 ayes. The motion passes unanimously. That's 6, okay. Selectmen's update. Are you there, Bill?
Good evening. Just another point regarding that Board of Ed meeting, Dina. I don't know. I'm on my laptop. I've been trying to get into the meeting and haven't been able to get into it either. Just a point of reference. Just a couple of things of interest, and then I don't know if you'd like comments regarding what the board may be considering about the 1% fund, or you'd like me to hold any comments I have until that's on the agenda. I'd be glad to do it. But I know several of your members are just interested in some of the things that are going on in town, so I'll try to be very brief, bringing up to date to things. The end of last week, municipality CEOs, town managers, and emergency management directors were requested to join a webinar by Eversource. And I did that along with Mike Gardner, our emergency management director, and several other people, and of course, numerous other leaders of communities. And what it was to alert all of us that there's a distinct possibility in the not distant future of doing rolling blackouts throughout Connecticut. There's 5 individual divisions of Connecticut they've divvied up. They've given us a schedule of that. I think we're number 5. One of the concerns on this is the potential lack of fuel supply. You know, we're normally used to blackouts or hearing about blackouts out in the West and everything due to extra demand on air conditioning and that. That's not the case in this particular situation. It's because of the potential of a lack of fuel, primarily gas. And what they're talking about is that these blackouts, they're figuring in their worst stage, which could be between 4 and 10 hours in each of the districts. And this would be ongoing until they give us notice. I know it's kind of concerning to me because we're used to the inconvenience of being hot and having to go in our cars to get cooled off or whatever. These would be complete blackouts in our area. Probably going to, a suggestion would
Excuse me,
happen.
Bill.
Bill,
Excuse
could you
me,
hold on
Bill.
for 1 second?
Sure.
Whoever's
Oh.
got their mic on, please shut it off because it's very hard to hear.
Thank you, Angie.
Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Do you need me
Yes,
to go
we're good.
back? Or I don't know how I was being received there.
Did everybody hear so far what was going on? Okay.
I think
No,
you're good,
go
Bill.
ahead, Bill.
Just keep going.
Okay. So anyway, what they're alerting us to is this potential of the rolling blackouts. But also what we've taken, and I've convened a meeting this past Monday with Mike Gardner, our emergency management director, with Joe Kalinowski, our highway foreman, with our fire chief, Tom Borman, and myself, with our director of social services. And I'll probably be having several more, but what we're trying to do, and we figure our strategy is, one, we want to identify any shut-ins that we may have, particularly those that are dependent on oxygen or any other means of life support. There are lists that are around that we're going to be referencing, but those would be critical items. We're also looking into our generation capabilities at all of our town buildings, town office building, Knowlton Hall, senior center, of course, also looking at the elderly housing, the fire department. We've had brief discussions with Craig, our superintendent of the school, to give him an alert on it. Just in case we needed warming centers, or we did have some of these shut-ins, or families who are in their homes and their pipes happen to freeze up, and we got to get them into warmer shelter. We're making preparations with our generators and that throughout the municipalities. The only one that we found that is really not hooked up appropriately, and it's going to be one of our ARPA fund expenditures, is the highway garage. We've got a minimal investment we're going to have to make there, but our other generators on our other buildings seem to be in fine shape. But it's just something I wanted to share with you that I know it was of concern to me when I heard about that, but apparently it's a distinct possibility, and the possibility is going to increase more if this Ukraine crisis overseas actually ends up maturing into a problem, because any contractual agreements, because of sanctions that we may impose on Russia, they're going to probably impose those same sort of things on ours, which are going to directly result in our fuel sources, resources being eliminated and withdrawn. So it's points of concern. We still, with regards to COVID, we're tracking our numbers. They continually decrease.
Excuse me, I have a question. Yeah, I have a question about what you were saying. So individually, we people will be without power 4 to 10 hours in our home. Is that what you're saying?
That's the potential.
And then therefore all of your refrigeration is out after 4 hours. So in other words, anything in the refrigerator you just throw out, right?
Well, that's going to be an individual choice. You know, I'm assuming there'll be some sort of a guideline by Eversource that's going to be forthcoming, but that's certainly a potential. And this outage will not be like we typically think of an outage, where certain facilities will remain powered. This is a complete blackout. All emergency hospitals, communication towers will all be expected to go on to their own generation. Any other questions regarding that? The only other thing is, I just want to bring you up to date. We continue on a daily basis monitoring our COVID situation. The numbers continually drop. Our hospitalizations are less than 50% of what they were a month ago. The daily positivity rates a month or so ago were averaging in the 20s, the low 20s to mid 20s, I think was the highest one I saw. Today's rate that came out from the local health department and from the state health department is at 4.75. So the figures are continuing to drop, and we continue to evaluate that. We're not going to take any drastic steps for changing any of the policies we presently have in place, but we are conscious of what's going on with the governor's recommendations on requiring and mandates of masks and that sort of thing. So we'll keep you posted on it. And the only other question, Judy, I had was, do you want me to make comment about the 1% fund and the non-lapsing fund with the board, or shall I wait till we get to that point on the agenda?
Well, it's next, and I don't know when you're gonna leave us to go to that other meeting. So if you prefer to do it now, that's fine.
Can I ask a question before we move on to the non-lapsing fund?
Sure, Christina.
So has there been any clarification, Bill, on whether the truck is going to be covered by ARPA funds? Do we have any more clarity on that?
We don't, other than I've sat in, and I know a couple of members, or at least one member of your board has sat in, and many other folks on a recent webinar that was held by Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. And based on the audit system, the audit report that we got from our local auditors, our revenue deficits, they've accounted for about $1,030,000 this year that we've identified. So that makes us available to use a standard deduction during the ARPA funds, which the consensus that everybody we've talked to so far seem to indicate that we will be able to put that truck into the ARPA funding, as well as a number of other projects that we have. Once we reach that watermark of $1,030,000, then the guidelines are going to get strong, a little tighter on us. But I'm optimistic, Christina, at this point that it's going to be covered. I'll wait to make further comments until you get into the next agenda item, Judy, if you like, or I can go on now. I'm monitoring the Board of Ed, and it did come on finally on my laptop.
Okay. Well, you can make your comments now, so you can listen to the Board of Ed
Well, my feeling is, my personal feeling on this, and I'm speaking as your first selectman and not the Board of Selectmen, because we haven't officially moved on this. Although I got a feeling we're on the same page on this. I would suggest that your board consider tonight changing the policy from 1% to a 2% ceiling. I'm going to leave it up to you whether you change your policy relating to the definition of how those funds can be appropriated. Right now, your policy differs from the state policy in that the state policy, when they made the change from 1% to 2% with a 3% ceiling, instead of their language is for educational purposes. The Ashford Board of Finance standing policy is for capital improvement projects. I'm going to leave it up to you regarding that. My personal feeling is I would encourage you to go from the 1% to the 2%, and I'll leave it up to your board regarding changing or not changing that definition. The other thing that I would suggest is that you hold off until we get clearer figures and as our budget process proceeds before you allot any particular funding to go into that 1 or 2% fund. We're still getting clarification. I will circulate. I think Paul has a copy of it. I know Paul met with the superintendent at the school, and I believe Cheryl Baker participated somewhat. I got in on a late call into the meeting, but I believe we've sort of clarified some of the fund balances that are left, both in CNR, the non-lapsing fund, and other projections. But tonight, I would highly encourage the Board of Finance to consider not appropriating any money into the school's non-lapsing fund until a future date. That's my thoughts on it. I'm glad to entertain any questions anybody might have. Thank you, folks, for your patience and your ears. So I'll let you proceed with your meeting. Thanks, Judy.
Okay, so that brings us to the old business and the discussion about possible action for the non-lapsing fund policy change. Does anybody want to have a discussion on their thoughts about the change, or to move this forward? I'm kind of in agreement with Bill at this time. The other thing I was thinking about too is it's a tough year for us to make big changes on a policy when we have a new board. There's no rush for this, and the funds that they were going to use is going to be used for capital anyway, capital projects. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
This is John. I have a couple things. The way I read it, it's not just for capital projects, though, if we change the wording on this.
No, I'm talking about not changing anything but the 2%, from 1% to 2%, and keeping the verbiage the same.
I would be okay with that if it sunsets July 1st, 2022.
Why is that, John?
Because this is a one-time windfall. We've never had this happen before where they've had more than the 1% left over. So I don't see any reason to make a policy that stands after this. We don't expect this windfall ever again. But if we raise it to 2%, I think it encourages more padding of the budget to have more money left over to get closer to the 2% left over at the end of the year.
So in the procedure itself, it says we can give up to 2% and not exceed the 3% cap. So it's up to the board anyway, whether we give 1, 2, whatever. The way it's written now. The only thing that would change is from the 1% to the 2% to allow us to increase it if we want to help them out with a project.
Right. But
Judy, if I could just
like I said,
make a comment.
I'm fine.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Go
John.
ahead, Bill.
I just want the board to make sure you're aware of any appropriation, whether it's at the 1% or 2%, has to be approved by the Board of Finance. And including if once there is, like they have a balance in there right now, if they have a project they want to spend any of that money on, and I know we've had experience in the past where that wasn't followed, and I think that's why some people have a bad taste in their mouth. But the protocol is that the Board of Finance has to have prior approval before any of that lapsing fund money can be expended by the Board of Ed.
Yes. Thank you.
Can I comment?
Hang on, Christina, for a second. John, do you have any more questions with that?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to think here. I guess my question is, when has the Board of Education had money left over at the end of the year that they did not request the full amount that they had left over to go into the non-lapsing fund?
Oh, I can't remember that.
I can't either.
Except that, Judy, Paul, I think in the past that they've never had anything near the 1%, never mind over 1%. So I understand your question, John. The problem is it's kind of comparing, and I understand why you said the sunset thing too. But the funds that are available here were not from over budgeting, so to speak, or padding. It's because they took advantage of the grants that were available to the Board of Ed to basically save money and then and use it for future use. It's a really sticky point. I understand your concern about padding too, and this fund is actually designed to prevent that, because having experience in the education field in prior years, prior to this statute coming out, the town or school systems would literally go on a spending spree in June to burn off all their excess money because they knew they had to give it back. And that happened here too. That's what one of the prompts for this fund to be even created was, or this system to be created was. That doesn't mean that people don't abuse it or systems don't abuse it. I know there's a bad feeling with the Board of Ed and distrust, and I don't blame anybody. I still am one of those people. But I can't see how with the number of controls that we have in place in this policy, the Board of Finance has every right to give them whatever amount we deem necessary, or we want to, I guess, not even necessary. From the time they have the unexpensed or unexpended balance to the time they actually go back and spend it, it all has to come before the Board of Finance. So
I agree with all that. I guess I'm still bitter from the last administration. Because
I totally get that.
They would turn the public loose on us.
Right.
He would deliberately turn the public loose on us to get his way. And I just know I don't like that. I never liked it. And I see too much potential for abuse. Now, I don't know the new superintendent. I've never met him. I can't imagine it's the same situation as it was. But then again, we changed this policy and he takes a new job as a full-time superintendent somewhere else. And who knows what we're left with.
Yeah,
so,
like I said, the good thing is
make
you
a
have
comment because I feel like, we need other voices to have a chance
Christina.
to speak.
Just a minute.
They're going back and forth with a conversation and other people should be allowed to speak.
And you will.
I think I should get to finish my point. I mean, it's not like this meeting's dragged on for 3 hours.
So continue, John, and then we'll acknowledge Christina.
That's really it. This is not a situation of abuse. This is a situation of the COVID stuff and the grants, and it's a windfall, and that's great. And that's why I have no problem doing as much as we can with that this year. But I think we should sunset it after this year because that's not going to happen again. And it goes back to the way it was. The amount of money that's typically left over at the end of the year, we always let them take it anyway. And it's worked out. I don't see any reason to change it to 2% because there's virtually no chance of that happening again.
So, John, the reason that we were going to change it to 2% is because they have a project coming up with an oil tank issue that they have to take care of. And so they had offered to pay half the fees of what this is going to cost. And if we give them 1%, they won't even make half of it. So that
I'm
was
suggesting
part
we
of the
give them
reasoning.
2%.
That was part of the reasoning of just the procedure draft that you have in your hand was prior to this conversation. The only thing that we wanted to change from the original is just from 1% to the 2%, so we'd have that option to give the school more if we all felt we wanted to give them more. Right now, we're locked down to 1%. We can't go beyond that.
Right, but we can only give them more of what they already have left over. So after this year, the chances of them having 2% left over in their budget again is slim to none unless they design it that way if they have a project in mind. And that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Let's see what he's saying. Okay. Are you done, John?
I'm done.
All right, Christina.
I just want to state for the record, because now two people have kind of criticized the previous school administration and implied that there was padding of the budget. And I just want to state from my point of view that I don't think that's been the case. And I understand people can have different opinions, but I think it's important that all voices are heard on something like that. So that being said, I think it makes sense, whatever is going on this fiscal year in terms of what projects need to be funded, et cetera, and the extraordinary circumstances of a pandemic and the extra funds that were available and the savings and the yada, yada, yada. Putting that aside, we are not in alignment with the state statute on what we can do. So to me, it makes sense to bring our policy in alignment with the state. And it's going from 1% to 2% would bring us in alignment with what the state says we are capable of doing. And I do think that this kind of policy, like Paul said, encourages boards and their school administration to be more honest and not do that burn through money at the end of the school year. Because if they know that the money is going to go to this unexpended education funds account, they're not incentivized to come up with expenses at the end of the year. So that to me seems like another reason why you would want to bring this into alignment with what the state says. And yeah, I just think it makes sense to do that.
Can I say something? Whoa,
Angie.
can I say? Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, when I was a teacher, I remember at the end of the year, the coordinator would come and say, order as many books as you want because we have, $250 and it'll just go to the general fund. So here's another example. I go along with Christina. I think keep it within what the policy is. I don't agree with changing it or extending, not extending it. What's the word? Limiting it to June of this year. I just say go from the 1% to the 2%, the way it's been explained in the details that you sent to us.
There's one thing I forgot to say.
Go ahead, Christina.
So the other piece that I think is important is this money, whether it's 2% or 1% or 5%, at the end of the day, whether you believe this budget is padded or not padded, was approved by the taxpayers to be spent on education. So if there is money left over in the education budget at the end of a fiscal year, and you take that money and you say, no, that money can't stay in this education account, you're actually not doing what the taxpayers approved. And again, you could believe a budget is padded all you want, but if the voters approve a budget, that's what they want the money spent on.
Can I just
Go ahead, Paul, because there's more information that needs to be shared.
no, I just I have to. I agree with what I understand what Christina's saying. I actually don't agree with it, because I'm not saying the budget's padded. I actually know it wasn't in this case. But the thing is that any department could do that, and if the taxpayers voted yes for the budget, for instance, if the library, quote, padded their budget because they wanted to do something and for some reason they didn't spend that money goes back to the general fund. They don't even have the opportunity to put it aside. So that's how the system works. This was created by the legislature to basically give the schools a means to answer non-recurring expenses that came up with, and not have to go back to the taxpayers or the town and ask for more funds from the general fund or the unexpended fund. So to say that the taxpayers approved it, you are correct. But if they did in fact pad their budget, then they lied to the taxpayers, and that's kind of our job as the Board of Finance, is to make sure that the budget's not padded. And then if there's a trend, and this is why I said there's so many, we built enough protections, I think, into this with the approval of the percentage. We don't have to give them 1%. We don't have to give them 2%. We can give them 0.5. We can give them 1.2, whatever we decide is appropriate. So that's really it. So I just think that's kind of a broad brush look at it. Well, you know, the taxpayers voted for it, but there are a lot of things that the taxpayers vote for without even knowing what they're really voting for. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just it's all bundled into a big pile. How many people here actually even read the budget book before they voted last year? And we're on the Board of Finance. Or I wasn't then, but I am now. So.
But the difference between a library budget, that is a town. We don't vote on the library budget separately. We vote on the school budget separately, and that's intentionally done. That's like legislated, that the town doesn't control the school budget. It's a separate budget. So it's not the same thing as the library budget.
Comes out of the taxpayer though for both.
The Board of Education is still responsible to explain to the taxpayers how they spent the money. So if they budget X amount of dollars and then get the budget passed and then turn around and say, yeah, you know what, all those things we said we were going to do, we're not. We're going to instead give $100,000 a year salaries to the Board of Education members. Again, that there's a mechanism there where you could say, okay, well, that money shouldn't have been done that way. That's not what we were told. So the idea that, yes, the taxpayers voted for this lump sum of money doesn't mean that the money can be used for anything. I also want to point out that we are in compliance with the state as it is, because the state allows up to 2%. The fact that we have this fund at all means that we are in compliance with the state. And also, I never said that there was padding in this budget previously. What I said was previous administrations have weaponized parents against the Board of Finance to get their way. I do not believe that they've had padded budgets, which is evidenced by the fact that we've had such small amounts left over at the end of the year. And I just want to make sure that that stays the way that it is, that it's not padded. There's no suspicion that it's padded, that it's used effectively and efficiently based on what comes out of the budget process and what gets voted on by the taxpayers.
Bill? Go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, Judy. I just wanted to point something out, and I think it's apropos to this conversation, but I just want to share it with you. I recently sat in, the Board of Education asked one of the leaders from CABE to attend one of their meetings, and he gave an excellent seminar that I really found informative and reminded us all of several things that I think we have to keep in mind. And while the Board of Education funding is paid for by the TAP primarily, except we do get ECS grants, which are considerable from the state to support those funds, which are still one way or the other, it's to which pocket it's coming out of. It's still our tax dollars at work. But one of the things that he said that Board of Educations consistently make a mistake in their presentations to their individual Board of Finances, or if a town has a similar setup, although it's not called a Board of Finance, that they should not refer these to as budgets. Budgets such as line items that all of our other departments have within their budgets. And they cannot switch a dollar from one of those line items to another without getting permission both from the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen. The exception to that is the Board of Education. The monies that is voted in for their operations should not even be called a budget. It's an estimated cost. And they statutorily have the authority within that budget to change whatever line items they want to change. It's not called padding. It's not called deceptive in any way. It's a statutory authority that they have. And I know I have forgotten that in the past, and I appreciated this gentleman reminding me. And I think in the back of our minds, what we ought to keep in mind is when the Board of Ed makes their presentation to you, and I've been critical of their budgets as much as anybody has from time to time, but it is a different sort of appropriation that we're making to their line item, or excuse me, to their estimates, and it's not a budget. And they do have an authority which is unique to within themselves to make line item changes. Could be perceived by one of us that it's a deceptive thing, but it's certainly within their statutory authority to do so. Just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else?
Yes, Judy, this is Jesse.
Hi, Jesse.
At the last meeting, there was some talk about using this money in the education funds account to be used for covering of special ed needs, so that if somebody moves into the town halfway through the school year and needed extra services, they would use that money from this account for that. And then in the past, every year when the school brings forth their estimate, they also are always very vague about the special ed money that's needed for that present school year that's coming. So I just question, I wonder if we did raise this up. I know there's the talk of the underground oil tank that needs to be addressed, but would there be a little bit less, guesswork, like just, I'm trying not to use the word budget because as Bill just explained, but, using what was used the previous year for special ed, knowing that they could fall back on this account if something came up unexpectedly. Just trying to work out the issues there. That's really my only question or concern on it.
Yeah. So I guess to me, the procedure as it currently is I don't feel it's confining. I mean, anytime the school needed something in the past, we always made sure we took care of them. The only reason that I suggested with this change in the procedure for only changing the 1% to 2% is because of the oil tank issue. At some point, we have to have faith in new leadership, cautiously, but we still have control over those funds. There's nothing they can do unless we allow them to do it. And we don't even know what's going in it yet because we have a bigger discussion coming at the end of this meeting, towards the end of this meeting. So I mean, I like the fact that it's, state's capital because it's used for an emergency funding. But even if there was an educational issue, we have in the past. We've covered them. I don't know how everybody else feels. Bill? Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get off the mute here. Sorry. Most of you are probably well aware of that, but the nightmare with boards of education historically, and I had a friend of mine who was first selectman in an abutting town to ours that had two major special ed placements who had major medical difficulties in the middle of the year. And by statute, they have to expend money. These two particular students were spinal bifida patients. They needed to be transported across town, across the state. That school had to go out and buy a van. They had to pay a driver because where they had to send them to, it didn't make any sense sending them there and then coming back. So it was a full-time driver and an aide to accompany these students. It amounted, and we're talking about a number of years ago, of almost $500,000 of expenditures unanticipated with that particular Board of Education. They had to address it that year. Now, were they going to be reimbursed by the state? Yes, absolutely, but not until the following year. And it just about bankrupt that particular Board of Education for that year. And those are the things that have to be in the back of everybody's mind. Potentially, it could happen to any one of our schools. We have no control over that. If a family chooses to buy a home here or to rent an apartment and they have a child that's under that circumstance, we are obliged by state statute to meet their needs. And if the Board of Ed, through this lapsing fund, can help lessen the potential of that burden, they still have to come to the Board of Finance for approval. But I think that that's even more of an important measure than why we should have a non-lapsing fund and why it in fact was created to help that scenario somewhat.
So with that being said though, Bill, I was under the understanding that the money that they're looking for this year was going for a capital project.
That's correct. But there is a balance in those accounts. I don't think that and perhaps Dina can address this better than I can, but I believe that they're hoping that if this goes through and the Board of Finance sees fit whenever you decide to do that, to appropriate enough money, they'd like to contribute a half of that into the tank replacement, 135,000 or a portion of that. If there's a balance left over, like right now, I know we've been debating how much is in that non-lapsing fund right now and going back and forth on that. And there is a little margin to help them with an unforeseen expense. They certainly like to have that instead of coming back to the town asking us for an appropriation above and beyond what we appropriated for them to operate during this fiscal year. Dina, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I know that it is our intention to contribute approximately 135,000 towards the tank, or 130 towards the tank replacement to assist the town with that capital project. That's part of the reason why we're looking for the monies. Whatever, I understand it's not the 155 that we had, that would be the 2%, that there has been some need for some of the funds, but we're looking for at least a portion. That way we can give back to the town and partially fund our own capital account, our own capital expense.
So that's what I'm trying to say right now, is the procedure fits that. I mean, we don't have to change it. We just have to change the percentage if we were to give them more than 1%.
Just one other thing, Judy, I'm sorry, I don't mean to dominate conversation here, but I think we all also, when we're talking about that particular project, have to realize that applications will be in order, and we're advised that 70 to 73% of those funds are going to be returned to the general fund of the town, which could regenerate the capital non-reoccurring fund if you folks so choose to do that.
Okay.
Paul, do you want a motion of some sort, or what do you want to do? I'm not sure.
So I'm not quite sure.
You had a draft proposal, but basically you're saying you don't want to use that draft policy. You just want to change the current policy as is, but from 1% to 2%. Is that accurate?
Correct, because that way it doesn't change anything, but leaves us an opening that if we choose to give more than 1%, that we can.
Can we make that motion?
I think
Why
that's
do we
the
make
best.
that motion?
Trying to figure out how to word it, because the current policy has some stuff in it at the beginning about general description. So,
Well,
but
it's
how
not.
about
It's not effective yet. That's just a draft.
No,
But the current
not the draft. No, not the draft. I'm talking about the actual current policy that's in effect.
Yeah.
And I know Cheryl's on here, so maybe she could help. But can I just word the motion that I move that we change in the current policy as written in paragraph 2. Hang on, let me go back to it. Where it's transferred shall not exceed 1%, and change the 1% to shall not exceed 2% of the amount appropriated to Board of Ed in that fiscal year, leaving the rest of the policy intact as written. And this is dated February 19th, 2015.
I'll second the motion.
How are we going to write the motion? Was Cheryl talking?
No, it's the Board of Ed meeting on the other side of the room, literally. So just, yeah, I'll just make a motion that we change in the paragraph 2 of the policy dated February, hang on, I can't remember the date. February 19th, 2015, paragraph 2, line 4, change exceed 1% of the amount appropriated to Board of Ed in that fiscal year to read exceed 2% of the amount appropriated to the Board of Ed in that fiscal year.
And I second the motion.
And Christina. Okay, so
I questions if we're at discussion yet.
Yep.
Okay, so one question. All right, one question is, if we sunsetted this to July 1st of this year to deal specifically with this instance and this windfall, there's nothing that says we can't revisit this policy at any time if we ever had another year that came up above 1%. which we've never come close to the 1% before. So I don't understand why it's such a problem to sunset it for this one unusual occurrence. The other question I have, it's very noble of the school to want to share in the replacement of the oil tank, but aren't we putting two hands in the same pocket? I mean, if the money goes back to the town uses the money to pay for the tank. Otherwise, we let the school keep it so that they can write us a check to pay for the tank. Like, if that's the only justification for doing this, I don't know. I just kind of don't get it. It's noble. It's great. But I'm like I said, I'm happy to give them the 2% this year because it's a windfall, and hey, let's take it. But I don't see why it has to stay permanently.
I don't think it makes sense to sunset it because then we're just gonna end up having this conversation again somewhere down the road. Because I think we are gonna hit this again.
No.
And we should,
Yeah.
if that's the case, and this
Not.
actually happens outside of COVID, then we should have that conversation again. But I don't know why we should change a standard procedure expecting a non-COVID year to produce a similar result.
I guess my question would be, why did the state change it then? Does anybody know why that was changed? I don't. I have no idea why they changed that number.
Or when they changed it.
And here's the other thing too, is that if you with the current motion we change it to 2, it says not to exceed 2%. It doesn't say we have to give them the 2%. We always have the option to not give them anything, actually. And quite frankly, the state statute is not a mandatory statute. We don't have to have this policy. It's an option that the town elected to do. So obviously, prior to me being on this board or even being involved, the town elected to do that. You know, times change. I'm not a fan of giving away money to anybody, but there is a need to have a savings account, whether it's us or the school or myself at home. You know, and also, this policy is much more restrictive than the state statute already. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to go through this whole conversation again in 2 years, just because we got lucky and we managed to save 1.3%. I mean, if we do and we don't think they need to have that 1.3, we just give them 0.8 or whatever.
So we have a
That's just
motion
my
and a
feeling.
second. Can we
So-
call the vote?
Excuse me. So John, when you're talking about sunsetting, how do you propose you do that with the current procedure?
With the current motion, you mean, or?
No, the current procedure. If we made no changes, you guys have a draft of a lot of changes. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the current town procedure. How do you sunset a current procedure?
The only thing I would add is to what is existing, you know, in the area of the 1%, I would just add or up to 2% in the fiscal year 2021, 2022. And that covers it. That automatically sunsets it. It shows that it's a one-off and it doesn't change our ability to do anything down the road. It handles this situation now. And honestly, if this situation came up again outside of COVID, it would be a different discussion that we would be having about why are we able to get 2% now when we've never come close to 1% before. So I would want to have that discussion again if we needed to change the policy for a reason outside of this extraordinary circumstance.
So I
Judy,
see your point. Bill?
well, in my opinion, what you have here, you have a a friendly amendment being offered of the amendment that's on the floor for discussion right now. If that's going to be considered, you need a second for that friendly amendment, and then a vote whether or not the majority wants to accept that friendly amendment. If that is voted down, then you would vote on the amendment that's on the floor right now, which is Paul's original amendment. You've got discussion, and John wants to add this, for lack of a better term, a friendly amendment to it, but that would need a second and a vote from your board to go forward.
Which is what I was going to offer if there was any interest. So I'll just go ahead and I'll make that as a friendly amendment to the motion that we add that we change the policy to 2% for the fiscal year 2021-2022.
This is Jesse Burnham. I'll second that.
Okay. So, motion to approve. I don't know how you want to say that. Motion.
I think you'd have to take a vote.
Motion to approve the friendly addition of the friendly amendment, I think is what you, right, Bill?
I believe, Judy, you'd call for a vote on the friendly amendment. If that passes, you would go ahead and vote on Paul's motion as amended. If it doesn't pass, then you would revert back and ask for a vote on Paul's amendment as the
Now,
original.
the only thing I'm concerned about is, so I don't have a problem like doing the 1% to the 2%, but I don't know the rules of making amendments like that. I mean, that's a little bit different for me. You know, I don't know if that needs to, I don't know if there's certain criteria or.
Well, Judy, the other way you could do it would be, of course, right now you have a friendly amendment offered that's been seconded. And I believe that take precedent. You've got to call for a vote on that.
Okay.
And then go from there.
Okay. So we'll call for a vote on the friendly amendment change to the non-lapsing fund policy procedure. That's going to state 2021 to 2022. All those in favor?
Aye.
Just a clarification before voting on this, Judy, that we're talking about the money we're talking right now. So 2021 would be the year that we'd be moving this money, correct?
Yes. 2021,
Okay.
2022.
Because 21, 22 is the fiscal year we're in right now.
Yeah, I was going to ask that same
Sorry,
question.
you're right. 2020, 2021.
Yep, 2020, 2021.
I'm sorry, I wrote it down wrong and repeated it.
So with that being stated, 2021, then I'm in favor of that.
Christina, no.
Angie, no.
John, yes.
Jesse was yes.
Everybody's got to vote or not vote.
Yeah, I don't know what to do.
A lot of silence.
Paul Varga, yes.
I'm gonna go with the yes. I don't know what to do. I mean, both ways it meets its purpose, right?
I'm not sure of that, but
Accomplishing our purpose, and we're not tying our hands in the future either.
I mean, if we wanted to, we could always change it next year. So 4 yeses and 2 nos. Motion passes.
could the motion as it's revised be read back, Judy? Because you guys have lost me talking about budget 2021.
So I guess it's to change the procedure in paragraph 2, line 4, 2% for the period of 2020 to 2021 in the
You know, I
non-lapsing.
think that we have a problem if we do that. Because then it's just saying that the only time you can transfer this money is for that specific fiscal year. So shouldn't it, but it would need to say 1% for every other year.
Yes, we left the 1% alone. We only said up to 2% in this specific fiscal year, but the 1% stayed.
So funds to be transferred shall not exceed 1%, except it will be 2% for fiscal year 2021. Like, what is the exact wording of that sentence, John?
I would say let's see. I don't have the paper in front of me.
So here's what it says. Funds, this is what it says right now. Funds to be transferred shall not exceed 1% of the amount appropriated to the Board of Ed in that fiscal year. So what do you propose that sentence now says?
Except for fiscal year 2021, 2022, it can be up to 2%.
To 2021. 2020 to 2021 can be up to 2%.
So funds to be transferred shall not exceed 1% of the amount appropriated to the Board of Ed in that fiscal year, comma, except for fiscal year 2020-2021, comma, it can be up to 2%. Should we say of the amount appropriated to the Board of Ed? Because otherwise, if you just say to 2%,
Yes.
it's to 2% of what?
Has to say of the amount appropriated to the Board of Education.
Yes, correct.
I don't know. I don't really feel comfortable voting on this unless I see the text in front of me and everybody sees the text, because I feel like this could get screwed up if we don't have the text nailed down and that everybody's looking at the same thing. I mean, if somebody could share their, if someone could share their
We don't need to
screen
vote on
and
this
type
tonight.
it.
We don't need to vote on this tonight. We have a rough draft of it. We can if the original motion is withdrawn, then it can be written up. Everybody gets to see it in writing at the next meeting and we vote on it then. That's fine.
Yeah,
How's
I
everybody
have to
feel?
agree with Christina on this, that it's really hard because with adding all that wording in there, it's ugly. So I will withdraw the original motion. And then I'll make another motion that we table this for the 17th and we have that wording corrected. And maybe we need to make sure that it's worded correctly, in a sense that we might have to get some advice from somebody, either the town or legal representation, to make sure we're doing this right. And So my motion is I'll withdraw the original motion. I'll make a motion and we table this to the 17th. But and then go ahead. And then I have a comment afterwards, Judy.
Okay, I'll
That
second
sounds
your
good because we're adding language for a specific fiscal year that we're dealing with in a separate fiscal year. So I'm more than happy to have the professionals look at our motion on this. So I'll second
your
Paul's
motion.
motion to postpone.
Judy, if Paul is withdrawing his motion, I believe whoever seconded his motion needs to withdraw that second also.
I think I seconded it, so I'll withdraw it.
Jesse seconded the amendment.
All right,
Yeah,
this is
Cheryl,
Jesse.
how does
I'll
that
also
work?
withdraw my second to the amendment.
I believe the amendment is dead in the water without the original, but I'll withdraw the amendment anyway, just in case.
I think you're right. It's kind of sticky, but
Yeah, because you all voted on it already, so I'm not sure how this works, but I think intent will play a big part in it.
Well, the only thing that was voted on, as I understand it, was the proposed friendly amendment to the original amendment.
Correct.
But if Paul withdraws the original amendment and the seconder withdraws their second, there is no amendment to be considered anymore. But I will also suggest that we defer to legal counsel to ask for a clarification.
Okay, so we're motion to table this to February 17th.
next week, that's correct. Yep.
Do we have a second on that
I
one?
second the motion. The only friendly suggestion I would say is a motion to table. It has to be dealt with during the same meeting. A motion to postpone can be dealt with at a future date.
That's true. Thank you.
Okay, so it'd have to be motion to postpone.
Motion to postpone. Yeah.
Okay, so that leaves to the discussion and possible transfers of funds on the
You got to vote on that, Judy.
Oh, I'm sorry. So a motion to postpone to February 17th. The approved changes to the unexpended educational fund account procedure.
Aye.
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 Okay, motion passes unanimously. Okay, now we move to the discussion and possible transfer of funds from the unassigned fund balance to the Board of Education on lapsing, but we really can't do that until we decide
Kind of
what
a
we're
moot
going to
point.
do. They decide what we're going to do with the procedure. So I guess we have to motion to postpone that too, right?
I think that's chairman's discretion, just to indicate that based on the prior motion, that consideration of the next agenda item will be postponed to the next meeting.
So we don't have to vote on it, just
I don't believe so.
put it together. Okay.
Really nothing. I'd have to agree with Bill. There's nothing to talk about because we can't talk about moving funds if we don't know how much we can move.
No, I'm just
And
wondering how you have to move, how we have to.
if you want,
postpone
I'll
it.
make a motion to postpone that to a future date because I don't know if that'll come up. We have to get this policy hashed out first.
But Bill said we don't have to do that
Yeah,
if it ties into the
Tyler,
first one.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
You guys want to vote on it or leave it?
Go ahead and vote on it just so you're consistent with your prior motion.
Okay, so motion to postpone the discussion and possible transfer of funds from the unassigned fund balance to the Board of Education non-lapsing fund. All those in favor?
Aye.
You need a
Aye.
second. You need a
Seconded, yeah, I was
second.
gonna say, John Kopek, I'll second it.
Christina, aye.
John, aye.
Oh,
Jesse,
Who else do we have ayes? Just Jesse?
yes, Jesse
And
and I.
myself, okay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, so we're moving on to number 8, new business. Transfer of funds from the unassigned fund balance to CNR fund. This one's kind of stuck in discussion too, because we really don't know what we're going to have for the outcome of funds to transfer until we get other stuff done. So should we postpone this one too?
Can you explain the context of this? What are we looking at?
So the transfer of funds from the unassigned fund balance to CNR. So the money that's left over in the unassigned account needs to be transferred somewhere. But we don't know what the figures are yet for sure, right? Cheryl? Anybody?
Well, we don't know what we're transferring yet to the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund, so we would, it would all play in together. So Christina, we want to keep our unassigned fund balance between 10 and 15%. And so whatever is left, we move it into the CNR fund, and that makes it assigned, and it's then not open to litigation or things of that nature. Keeps the money from being available to be expended.
What does CNR stand for?
Capital non-recurring.
Thank you.
So, Paul, do you want to discuss
Yeah,
the figures?
if you want, I was just going to say, I'll give you a motion to postpone it for a future meeting, because again, we can't discuss the figures until we know what we're going to do with the Board of
The
Education
final.
non-lapsing fund. So,
Yep.
yeah,
Okay.
that makes everything else, it kind of all hinges together. It's all in the same pile, so to speak. All the stuff goes together. So I'll just make a motion that we postpone it to a future meeting.
I'll second that.
Christina, aye.
Hang on. Are we going to put this towards the next meeting? Put it
That's
towards
entirely up to you.
So we'll put it towards the what is it? The next meeting's February 27th.
17th next week.
February 17th. Okay, so all those in favor of postponing the transfer of funds from the unassigned balance to the CNR fund to the meeting of February 17th, 2022.
Aye.
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 Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, update of FY 2020 to 2021 annual report.
All right, since we last met, I don't think any additional reports came in. But as it stands right now, we're missing 13. So just to do a quick rundown of what I'm looking for still, Office of Selectmen, Zoning Board of Appeals, Assessor, Finance Department, Conservation Commission, Transfer Station, Economic Development Commission, Municipal Agent for the Elderly, Housing Authority, Department of Public Works, Animal Control, Information Technology Department, Board of Ed, and Superintendent. And that's it. So
Those are the ones you have?
those are the ones that I need.
You need. Oh,
So I'll start with getting some emails out to those particular offices to make sure we get those coming in.
Has a
Okay.
request been sent to the Board of Ed yet? For what you're looking for? I don't recall seeing anything.
Okay, Cheryl was usually the one that sent those out with requests, but I'm not sure if she would send that request to the Board of Ed.
No, it's done every year, so it's assumed, it's done every year. So we don't send it to Region 19 either, or I don't know that we sent one to the fire department. We just, we're required by statute to have an annual report and required to have information from the Board of Education.
Okay, well, I've been here since July, not quite a year. So if you send me what you're looking for, I'll be more than happy to get something to you.
Okay, we just need an annual report.
We get that to you.
Yes, Judy?
yes. Who is it? Bill?
It's Bill. Jesse,
Hi.
can you send me an email of all of those that are not? And we'll try to, from my office, we'll send out a reminder, including
Sure.
to ourselves, to get you whatever information you're looking for. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Bill. Anything else, Jesse?
Nope, that's all I've got.
I feel like I broke my promise. You said you'd do it if it was easier.
Well, so far it's been a lot easier, so it's all right.
Yeah, you're doing good. Thank you. Okay. Any questions or anything for Jesse before we move on? Good. Next item is the July 2021 to January 2022 expenditure and review. Revenue review. I'll start with Cheryl. Have you seen anything that stands out that you're worried about, or Cheryl? Paul, you got any questions?
Sorry, Judy, I covered you up with I'm working with one screen and that's challenging. I will mention that the revenues are through January 31st. That does not include revenues collected by the tax collector through January 31st, because some of them we get, a lot of them we get electronically because she does a lot of collections online. And so they're not actually deposited until February.
Okay.
So those numbers are actually higher than you see.
I have to admit, Judy, you asked me, I didn't get a real good look at them this time. I've been a little busy with some other stuff going on with the Capital Committee and the fire department. So, but from what I looked at real briefly, I didn't see anything that stuck out to me. But that doesn't mean it doesn't stick out to somebody else. The revenue thing I did notice, but I kind of assumed, because I know my bank takes a long time to send their money out, or my money out that they take from me. That was it.
The question I had on the revenue side was that the payment in lieu of taxes is 300% over what was expected. I was just curious why that was. That's a good thing, but.
Cheryl?
I don't have the revenues open. Hang on. I'm used to having more monitors to work with. Sorry guys, and my mouse died and I'm not great with the tab. I can't get it open. There we go. Sorry.
And you have it down to
Who's got that noise?
Me smacking my keyboard. Or my dog snoring. That's happening behind me too. I do not know what that is.
And actually, now that I'm looking at it, the line item underneath it, payment in lieu of taxes, AHA, which I assume is Ashford Housing Authority, that's
right.
Under.
It is
like
not.
No money.
We did not get anything from Housing Authority yet.
so.
So I will have to look on Christina. To be honest,
Okay, I
I've
mean,
not had a lot of time to do any of this. I've been working on the budget and it's been a challenge.
it sounds like it could be a bank error in our favor, so that's good.
More likely it's it has to be reclassed to another account. That would be, that's state, those are state funds, payments in lieu of taxes.
Right.
That line is state funds we get for the property.
So you think it's not all there, that it should all be there?
I think that should not be there.
Okay. So then let's find out why.
Anybody else? I didn't see anything at the moment that's struck me.
You might have a few more dollars, right? But you're still where you are. Yeah. So.
Are we good, guys? Okay. So we'll move on to item number 9, agenda items for February 17th regular meeting. So we have to revisit the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund policy change.
I believe that's the week that the selectmen will present the budget also, so.
It is.
Okay.
Judy, Cheryl, you're correct. That's the next 2 meetings are budget presentations. So, I mean, we did vote to move that to that date, so we'll have to do that as well. But the biggest thing in that, I guess now we have 2 big things that'll happen at that meeting. Is the Board of Selectmen will present the general budget and the capital improvement plan. And hopefully Dina will have a hard copy of the Board of Ed budget to give to us, but I'm listening with one ear to that meeting, so she might not. And then the following meeting, which is actually 2 weeks later, is when the Board of Ed presents their budget to the Board of Finance. So
It's not a budget though, right? It's estimates?
well, that's true. It's not. It's a request for funding. That is actually an accurate statement. But we call it a budget because we all like to look at their numbers and criticize them. But so that's and then now we have, so in addition to that presentation next week from the Board of Selectmen, we would have the Board of Ed non-lapsing fund, and then a discussion on the moving that money into the non-lapsing fund, and then also moving money from unassigned funds to CNR. The only thing
So-
I will say is, go ahead.
So which one, we didn't put the date on all of them.
So
So
you just put the date on the, actually, I'm sorry, you're right. We only put the date on the non-lapsing fund policy and on the unassigned fund balance to CNR. But they kind of tie in together in that it all comes out of that unexpended fund balance.
yeah, but we're not going to have any real numbers until after the presentations, right?
After the policy, yeah.
So how can we vote on something that we're not going to have real numbers on yet? I'm wondering if maybe we can just do the procedure because we put the date there.
Yep, that's fine with me. We can talk. I mean, you can tell me what you want on the agenda, Judy, and I just type it out and send it to Cheryl, and she types it out and sends it back to me. So
No, I just don't know. Like I wasn't even thinking that next week it already begins.
what I was going to add was, for the benefit of the board, because we weren't able to do the movement of into the non-lapsing and CNR, that's going to create a problem for the capital committee because they don't know how much money they will actually have available. So that may delay the capital part of the Board of Selectmen's presentation. I'll talk to Bill about that probably tomorrow when I drive by, because that's that. But anyway, yeah, so that could also be a thing. But I know that Cheryl's been working like crazy to get the Board of Selectmen budget stuff done. So we need to, that has to be on that meeting.
Well, I know what Bill was saying to postpone moving any funding and stuff for now.
Right.
So, he knows.
Right. It's not that, but it's just important that we know how much is available. The capital committee needs to know how much is available. So.
Understood.
Right. That's the biggest thing, is that I want to make sure that everybody on the board understands that the next 2 meetings are budget presentations or funding request presentations. And then the first meeting in March is our opportunity to ask specific departments or boards questions about their budgets before we move forward. I mean, this is literally, for lack of a better term, it's crunch time when it comes to budget stuff. So.
Hey, Paul, this is Jesse. I just wanted to clarify the dates. So the 17th is when the selectmen present.
Correct.
And does the Board of Ed present on the 24th or on March 3rd?
Correct. The 24th.
24th.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we have 2 meetings, the first and second week of March. There were 2 meetings put in the calendar to allow the Board of Finance to review the budgets basically as a group and discuss them. And if we had any questions, ask departments for clarification or request funding changes. So you've done this before, Jesse, so you know how that part works.
Yeah, it does. I just when I got the dates for the meetings, I didn't write down the 24th for some reason in February, so.
I can send you, I'll send you the calendar again. I'll send it out, I'll send it out to everybody again with the, tomorrow or Saturday. So everybody has it hasn't changed. The budget calendar hasn't changed, but you can look and see where we're at within it. And I'll send the Board of Finance calendar too. So everybody has it for reference.
No, we're gonna be close. Right.
Okay, we all set? Any more comments?
I wouldn't be surprised.
We'll go to the remarks for the good of the board. We had some really good discussion tonight and a lot of good opinions. I appreciate all the input from everybody. And have a nice week. Call for the motion to the meeting to adjourn.
I do.
So moved.
Angie and Jesse.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Bye, everybody.
Motion passes unanimously.
Bye.
If there's a term that we're going to remember from this meeting, it's weaponized parents.
Nice.
Weaponize the public. Have a good night, everybody.